Welcome to the Institute of Contemporary Art. I'm Chabelyz from the Teen Arts Council.
I'm Christian Nassar Allen, and I also work on the Teen Arts Council.
And again, we want to thank you for coming. My first question is, what were you kind of thinking about when you were creating all of this?
Well, these arise out of my lifelong love of music, but specifically, ever since I was a little boy, I've kept a track record of potential band names and song titles. Just an ongoing list that's now well into its thousands, several thousands. But the idea was, I didn't know how to play an instrument, but in case I ever got into a band, I could contribute the band name or the song title right away, or the album design cover, like all the other things that go into making a band. So I've had that list for years, and some of these are pulled from that. But anyway, I like to imagine these fictional companies and the albums they would release for the year. But they're very particular companies, a very specific focus. So for example, Lamb of Man is a religious pop record label that I've kind of, all from my imagination. But it also would be customary for a record label to release all their upcoming releases for the year as an advertisement itself. So these are kind of based on that idea. Like, these are all the releases coming up for the year. So these are all very specific lenses I decided to imagine these pop groups through. So if one were to read them all together, they all have very conflicting points of views, which is part of also my love of the Battle of the Bands format. I've always loved that format of arguing and getting all your problems out based on two bands sort of playing
Against each other.
yes, against each other. I like that idea of solving problems through a pop song.
You said that you also have like an interest in science, separate from your interest in art. So how would you say that interest sort of lends itself to all of the work that you do and really distinguishes you from other artists?
This is a big issue to me, in that if there's an issue, there's a level of believability or an issue of believability in my work that often the viewers have trouble sort of making a leap as far as a material really being there, or how did I turn that material into this? And although I love that play of, is this possible? For me, it's always rooted in science. And this is where it becomes very important in that if I say something's in there or that I did something, I really did it. And it really is in there because this is I like this image, this mental image. If you think of a scientist going to the laboratory every day, they don't walk into the laboratory hoping to make a metaphor or symbol. Right. They hope to really make something that works. Like, you ingest this or whatever they're working on, they expect it to have a practical, real-world consequence. And the artists walk into the studio, and we have the luxury of making metaphors and being symbolic, which I love. But I also like the idea, well, what if I went into my studio tomorrow and had two criteria, one metaphor, one practical? Like, it really works.
Has it ever been hard, for example, if you make up a material and if you don't find it, does that happen a lot where you have to change it?
It happens less than you would think. And
Really?
Yes, and which startles me too, because I will come up with some things that I'm purely for the love of the word on the page. That's all I'm.
Awesome.
Yeah, like a million-year-old raindrop or a million-year-old blossom. You know, I'm sure. I'm thinking that I love the way this sounds, but how is that possible in the real world? But then that's where the detective in me kicks in, and which I've really pride myself on having very good detective skills. And I go find it. I go do the homework, the research. Where in the world would this exist? How does it exist? And I'd say by far the majority of the time I find it. But then there's the other step of, okay, I find a, but then I do what I want to do to it that whatever my idea is, that's another whole round of development.
So specificity definitely seems to lend itself also to your work. Do you think that if there was a lack of specificity in your work, that it wouldn't be as much of like a Dario Robleto creation? Like, do you think it would have the same meaning, or that the intent would still be there even if it wasn't as specific as, you know, you tend to be with your work?
I don't. No, because there's a lot writing on that. Things being what I say they are, or if I'm referencing actual historical fact, which I often do, the whole point of the piece is that it's historically accurate, so I have to be very specific there. So I often use the criteria of other fields, like a historian, the process a historian goes through on fact-checking, for example. You know, a historian can't be a good historian or do their job if they're going to have leeway on some fact, right? That's not history anymore, it's something else. So for me, in a similar way, when I'm using other fields in my own production, I feel I can't, it's got to be specific because everything's hinging on it being specific.
Since you're very into music and you've kind of evolved from the DJ to the materialist poet, since you've led into science, do you think that it's like you've evolved, kind of?
Yes. The first step was to move from DJing just being an audible experience to finding other ways that DJing can exist in the world, and which led me to materials. So I mean, that was a huge shift in my thinking, and that was almost 15 years ago now. I can't believe that. So in that last 15 years, it's evolved a lot more. I have this question I always ask is, what can art do? And from, can it hold your shirt together, as the buttons were trying to solve in the other room, or can it solve the question of human longing? So there's like a wide range of problems that I'm trying to ask art. What is art's outer limit? What are its capabilities? So I hope I'll keep evolving on that. There's never a final point.
We kind of want to go to the record shop. Do you want to come with us?
I'd love to.
So we have now arrived at Armageddon, a record shop in Harvard Square, and we're just going to be talking some more with Dario Robleto about all of his work, and some of which includes records, or vinyl records, of course.
Yes.
And speaking of records, who's your favorite artist?
Well, it's hard to pick one, but a group very influential to me called the Smiths, and especially their lead singer named Morrissey. I've been a lifelong fan since I think I bought first Smiths album when I was 12 or 13, and haven't missed one since.
Are vinyl records even like not accessible, but like, do people really listen to them anymore? And so it sort of made me think a lot about a question of accessibility, because in order to have to be able to play a vinyl record, you have to have like a specific sort of equipment, as opposed to like an iPod or anything else like that. So do you think that accessibility is something you think is also a question in your work?
I think for a vinyl collector, there is a sense of, as I'm saying, you got to put some work into this. Like from buying them to having to store them to physically playing them, which honestly, it seems silly to think it's such an effort to sort of put this object on a record player and play the stylus, as opposed to pushing a button. And the time difference is very small, actually, but it seems like a mountain you have to climb for a lot of younger people, and I get that. But at this point now, I think people who collect the records, there's a sense of foreplay with it that's involved in touching, and all the other senses are coming into play when you, even because I'm a big fan of album art and the liner notes and the way it smells, the way it feels, particular sound quality. There's all these steps that go into playing it that I value very much.
Considering the fact that you rescue artifacts and historical materials and you like bring life into them, would you be a doctor or archaeologist?
Do I have to pick one?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with doctor.
I thought you would go with a doctor.
Just slight edge. Because as an artist, I've decided I don't need to pick anyone. I just decided to pick them all. That's partly why I became an artist, is I realized it was the best umbrella to just put every passion I had under it. But if you're forcing me to choose, I'd probably go with doctor because of that healing part that I take very serious. And I love this. It's such a strange idea to think, would the public accept artists making medicine for them? Would that have the same credibility in culture, like, and for it to succeed and to work, and the sort of authority a doctor has? I like thinking about art and artists having a similar standing in culture, that people would expect some sort of transformation to occur.
What did you want to be when you were really young?
Well, a football player, Dallas Cowboys. Just wishing I could. Still a big Dallas Cowboy fan. Astronaut, some obvious things that a little boy would want to be. But I guess they're all things that I still are still referencing in my work. Because a big rock and mineral collector, so geology, archaeology, science.
Artist.
But that's the thing, is that art never came up as far as defining myself, that's what I would be. That came much later in life. And like I said, I realized one day art was just the best term to call being passionate about everything. Just put it all under that.
I've read in the book, The Alloy of Love, that a lot of your artworks, the frames are part of them. So it's kind of like the frames are the stage where your pieces play their music.
That's good, I like that.
Yes? Okay, I wanted to know if you agreed with that, because that's what I was thinking of.
Well, yeah, and in some cases, for example, a piece called The Creative Potential of Disease, the frame itself is made of bullet lead.
Yeah.
That lead was excavated from a battlefield that I know caused, or that I know that soldier was injured on that battlefield, that the piece references. So the frames are intimately linked to whatever it is they're containing. Frames and pedestals are not casual decisions to me. They're essential to the whole object.
All right, well, thank you so much.